Welcome to Eastown Online. My name is Emerald, and I'm really glad that you have chosen to watch us today. Our life work here at Eastown is for anyone to experience Jesus, belong in community, and love our neighbor. What does that mean for us? It means that we want you to know that Jesus wants to get to know you, who you are and where you're at in life right now. He wants to know you, and he wants you to know him. It means that we are encouraging our people to live life together in community to see all the ways that Jesus can show himself. And it means that we are committed to loving local. Loving local means that we want to show up with love and mercy and grace and justice wherever we go. If it is your first, second, or third time watching and you've never checked in with us, you can do that by texting Eastown to 94000. I want to encourage you to subscribe and share, and don't forget to comment. I want to hear what it is that you're learning as you are watching. I know for some of you, this right here is a first step into community. And so I want to thank you for taking that leap to join us. But I also want you to know it is so much better in the room. So today, I pray that in the meantime, you take in this moment, and I pray that this message pushes you to love God, love yourself, and love others better. Enjoy.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul.
Good morning. Thanks again for having me, Eastown. It really has been a joy to be with you a few times this summer. If you're watching online, I also want to say just thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here, glad you're joining us. So this morning we have the privilege of studying Psalm 66. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app, you can go ahead and turn there with me, Psalm 66. If you don't have a Bible or a Bible app, go ahead. You can feel free. The passages are going to come up on the screen, but if you want to open a Bible, you're welcome to do that. Psalm 66 is a psalm about difficulty. It's a psalm about facing hardship and about suffering. It's a psalm for the weary, for the tired, but it's also a psalm of hope. Like all of the psalms in the book of Psalms, the psalmist, the writer of the psalm, invites us into their own experience, to understand the author's point of view and then to offer for us to join in it, to literally sing their experience as our own. The Psalms, the book of Psalms, are literal songs. They are designed for singing. And so today, if you're facing hardship, if you're facing trials, you're facing suffering, if you're tired, if you feel broken, this psalm from the Bible is a song for you. Very little is told to us in the Bible about the context of Psalm 66. We don't know the specific author. Some people wonder if it might have been David. Others hypothesize that it might have been King Hezekiah, the 13th king of Judah. We don't really know for sure. We don't know the historical context. Sometimes the Psalms gives us little notes that kind of tell us like what was written and what was going on. We don't know that. All we know is that this psalm was written for the choir master. That's what it says in the preface to the psalm, and that it is a song designed to be sung by others. Like much of Hebrew poetry in the Psalms, the authors actually place like the heart of the song, the key point of the psalm in the very middle, which is kind of different than the way we normally do. We do things at the beginning or the end. Hebrew poetry often has the meaning in the middle. Let me read this middle section, the catalyst for why this psalm was written. This is Psalm 66, verses 10 through 12. For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You have brought us into the net. You laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads. We went through fire and through water, yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance. The author of this psalm stands on the other side of a series of trials that they have endured and they've persevered through. The psalmist has gone through difficulty and pain, and they're sort of reporting back to us on the other side, not only their experience of suffering, but also some lessons that they've learned, some ways that we might learn too how to endure and respond to our own seasons of trial and hardship. It should be said from the outset that there's like nothing more annoying or frustrating than hearing like simple answers in the middle of a serious trial. Like when you're hurting, you're going through something, we don't want to hear someone say like, oh, it's okay, it's gonna be all right. God has a plan, focus on the positive, or our thoughts and prayers are with you. Classic social media response, right? Especially from someone that we think has like no idea what we're going through, no idea what we're experiencing. even if those simple answers that people give might actually be true, or if the person means well, when we are hurting, we don't want to hear those. We want to shout back like, you don't understand. You have no idea what I'm going through. No idea what I'm feeling right now. But if when we're suffering, we hear someone say, I remember when my husband died. I remember when I had another miscarriage. I remember when I lost my job, when I was assaulted, when I found out I was sick. Something changes in how we hear that person. When someone listens and someone says something like that, we begin to believe that there might be a chance that they understand what we're going through. While the issues might be different, encountering someone else who has stood in our shoes or in shoes like ours, someone who's faced serious trials and difficulty, opens our hearts. And in that moment, we know, for a moment at least, we're not alone. We're reminded that there are others who have journeyed this path of suffering and difficulty before us, and they may have some wisdom to share with us. I can remember when my wife Rachel and we faced one of our most serious trials. We were a couple years into our marriage, and Rachel all of a sudden started having really serious seizures. We had young kids at the time. This was a brand new thing for her. We didn't know what the cause of this was, and we feared the worst. So when that often happens, it's a brain tumor, it's a neurological disease, and we began this myriad of tests, and we were really raw in those moments. We didn't want simple answers. And in that season, I was definitely mad at God. How could he do this to my wife? Where was he in the middle of this trial? And at that time, I remember just looking back, it was over probably 10 years ago now, even longer than that, 15 years ago. I was so thankful that I had people in my life who had faced serious challenges. I had a friend who lost his teenage son in a really horrible car accident, a dear friend. I had another friend who was living with a spouse who had a progressive MS, and he'd been handling that for over a decade. These were people whose lives I could look to, I could go to, and I could be encouraged by. They were people who were still faithful to God, even after facing really serious difficulties and trials. And so in Psalm 66, the psalmist is sort of offering to play a role like that for us today. The author speaks to us out of the overflow of their own experience of difficulty. They have faced serious trials. Their situation is described as a crushing burden in verse 11. They've gone through fire, they say that in verse 12. And while that specific situation maybe that they're going through isn't totally given, this is a song that is written by someone familiar with pain. And yet, they're on the other side. This section that we just read, it ends with the psalmist saying about God, "Yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance." This is a song of hope. The counsel given in the psalm is from someone who's endured under great trials, speaks wisdom from that other side, and yet has remained faithful to God. And so the psalmists, they're not just able to emphasize, able to listen, they're also able to provide some counsel on how we can endure in our times of hardship as well. So as we look at this psalm today, I want to look at 5 things, some of which may feel counterintuitive, that this psalm calls us to do when we face trials and hardships. So 5 things we can do right now in the midst of any kind of difficulty we're facing so that we too might be able to emerge on the other side into a place of abundance and hope. Sound good? Everybody down? 5 things? You can handle that? All right, cool. First thing, number 1, sing. Sing. Verses 1 through 4. This is, after all, a song. And the psalmist is clear that one of the ways that we can be strengthened in our own time of difficulty is to sing and to sing joyfully. Verse 1 through 4 starts the psalm like this: "Shout for joy to God, all the earth. Sing the glory of his name. Give to him glorious praise. Say to God, how awesome are your deeds. So great is your power that your enemies come cringing to you. All the earth worships you and sings praises to you. They sing praises to your name." 3 times in that we are told to sing. We're told to shout in joy and say aloud, how awesome are your deeds. These are people who are really encouraging us to sing. And at the same time, though, when you are in the middle of something difficult, singing for joy might not seem great. It might seem like a kind of living in denial, like ignoring or repressing even your true feelings, right? And I want to be clear that the Psalms doesn't teach us to do that. There are a number of Psalms, and the Psalms are refreshingly honest about how people are crying out to God in despair and anger. The Bible is very honest, and even a majority of the Psalms are laments. They're people going through hard things. So the psalmist isn't saying, don't feel your feelings, don't be frustrated, don't be angry. It's saying something different. When Rachel and I were in the middle of that trial and we were trying to figure out what was causing her seizures, I was mad at God, for real mad. And in my prayers, I cursed at him, real curse words, not churchy curse words, Like if I was on live TV and I said them, it would like bleep me out or fine somebody. I was furious at God. And I told him that, partially because I've read the Psalms. But it's not all that I told him. There was a point in which I needed to stop allowing my feelings to totally control me. I needed to acknowledge my feelings, but not allow them to dictate everything I thought about reality. Because our feelings, they're not always reliable. They're an indicator of something. They're one indicator we have. They tell us something, but they don't tell us everything. And underneath my feelings was really a question, is God good? Is he trustworthy? Is God good even in the midst of my pain and my wife's illness? And the psalm teaches us that sometimes we need to sing something, hear this, that we don't yet feel or we don't presently feel because we believe it's true. And this, we have to recognize, this isn't a denial or the reality of our actual feelings, but a refusal to be governed by our feelings alone. Singing words of praise to God is speaking truth to the sometimes overwhelming power of our emotions. Biologically, actually neurologically, if you were like a brain scientist, they know this, that singing actually strengthens and reinforces the neural pathways in our brains. And then when we reinforce these pathways with songs and words of hope and truth, it's helpful in that moment, but it also creates like a neural pathway that we will come back to when we're facing difficulty later. We see this modeled in our country's history, the value of this kind of singing. American slaves, they sang this. They composed and they sung spiritual songs of hope, even in the midst of brutal, enduring injustice. They weren't just governed by their feelings or circumstances. That didn't dictate their faith. No, they sung prophetically songs of hope, often inspired by these very psalms, and gospel music was born. And today, generations of people have been strengthened by these songs of truth and hope. And Psalm 66 teaches us that when we face trials and hardships, we too need to sing. All right, that's number one. Number two, Psalm 66 teaches us that when we face hardship, we must remember. We must remember. We see that in verses 5 through 9. When we face trials, we need to remember. Verse 5 begins a section in which the psalmist remembers how God has acted in relation to the people of Israel. I'm going to read it to you. It says this. Come and see what God has done. He is awesome in his deeds toward the children of men. He turned the sea into dry land. They passed through the river on foot. There did we rejoice in him, who rules by his might forever, whose eyes keep watch on the nations. Let not the rebellious exalt themselves. Bless our God, O peoples. Let the sound of his praises be heard, who has kept our soul among the living and has not let our feet slip. It's been noted by a number of commentators that Psalm 66 kind of follows a unique pattern in which the psalm sort of starts out with the universal, like big picture universal, and it becomes increasingly specific in the audience that it's addressing. It moves from the universal to the national and then to the individual. We'll see that trend. At first, the psalmist addresses the whole world, including phrases like verse 1, shout for joy to God, all the earth. Verse 4 says, all the earth worships you. Verse 5 says, he is awesome in his deeds toward the children of men. That phrase, children of men, is basically humankind, mankind, right? We see this sort of universal declaration. The author of this psalm begins with the whole world in mind, reminding the reader and the singer, right, that God is the God of the entire universe. This psalm begins by broadening our vision, reminding us that God is not just our personal deity, not just the God of our people or of our culture or of one period of time, but that he is actually the God of all people, God over all cultures throughout all of history. And I don't want you to misunderstand me. I don't think the psalmist is advocating like the idea of like postmodern Western philosophy that every culture's view of God is true. I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think mutually contradictory ideas of God are what's he's in mind here. And the psalmist is not also agreeing, with that idea that like every worldview has bits of truth, but no one has unique access to truth. Like I don't think this is like the psalmist saying that. You guys heard that classic, like all religions are just blind men feeling up an elephant or something. It's always just a weird thing in philosophy class they teach you. Rather, I think what's happening is the psalmist is doing here is reminding us that we individual people who live here in the Bay Area, you, me, we don't have a monopoly on experience with God. This isn't to affirm like the pluralist who thinks that everybody is right, but to confront the individualist who thinks only they are right, only their experience is true. The psalmist reminds us that God is bigger than any of us, that he is bigger than our suffering and our trials, whether individual or national, that God is and has been sovereign over every nation, over every trial that has ever been faced. And in a difficult world with a lot going on, some of us need to remember that truth today. As Psalm 66 progresses, that focus begins to narrow. And the psalmist begins to describe how God has been faithful specifically to the people of Israel, to his people. While God reminds us that he is the God of the whole world, the psalmist also wants us to remember that God has been specifically faithful to his people. The psalmist remembers verse 6, it says this, "He turned the sea into dry land. They passed through the river on foot. There did we rejoice in him." The psalmist is recounting about how after 400 years of slavery to Pharaoh in Egypt, God rescued the Israelites, brought them out of Egypt into a promised land. You guys remember like Prince of Egypt, that story, that movie? You've seen that? This is the story. To begin this new nation for themselves. And during this rescue, God uses Moses to bring the Hebrews to the edge of the Red Sea. And the armies of Egypt and Pharaoh were closing in on them, and then God shows up in a spectacular fashion. Maybe you're familiar with the story, you've seen the movie, but sometimes we forget the details. Let's read them again. During the trial of the Israelites, they had lost confidence in God. They were freaking out. They were facing a hardship and a trial, and they wavered in the faith. In Exodus 14, it says this, "When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. They feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, 'Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?'" It's encouraging. "What have you done to us in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, "Fear not. Stand firm and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians who you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, for the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariot and his horsemen." The psalmist reminds the Hebrew audience of this critical national story in their history. And he reminds us today that there have also been other times when we have been afraid, other times when we might have lost faith. And yet, do we not remember? Did God abandon you? No, God showed up and rescued them. Do you have a story like this that you need to remember in your own life? Can you look back in your own story and remember a time that God showed up and rescued? A marriage saved, a time of grief healed, depression endured, a body restored, a relationship reconciled? Maybe in your present season of trial, it would be good to remember a past time that God showed up. Can't think of one? Struggling with that? Think about this. Maybe this present moment that you are in is a time that you will look back on in the future and be encouraged by. Maybe what you are enduring today will be your encouragement tomorrow. Remembering reminds us that that too is possible. Psalm 66 teaches us that when we face trials and hardship, we need to remember God's faithfulness in our stories. And maybe this week you can take some time to write some of that out in a journal, to talk to a friend about some times when God showed up for you. To share together, hey, when is a time when, whatever you're going through right now, when you really were clear and knew that God had shown up? Has that happened to you? Tell someone about that. We need to remember these past times if we are to endure present seasons of difficulty and crisis. Third thing, number 3, the Psalm 66 teaches us when we face hardship is that we must believe. We see this in verses 10 through 12. When we face hardship, we need to believe. God, he'd rescued the people of Israel time and time again. He'd been faithful to defeat their enemies, to save them from defeat again and again. But when we come to verse 10 through 12, what we read earlier, which I said is kind of the heart and the crux of this psalm, the psalmist describes God's actions a little bit differently. God isn't just described as the people's rescuer, right? He's actually in some ways behind these trials. It says this, "For you, O God, have tested us. You have tried us as silver is tried. You have brought us into the net. You laid a crushing burden on our backs. You let men ride over our heads. We went through fire and water, yet you have brought us out to a place of abundance." This is a difficult text, right? And yet this isn't like the sermon to parse out how God's sovereign control works, how free will works, how God is in control, and yet the Bible still describes the world as being in rebellion against God and broken by sin. These are really important issues. I'll save them for Clint and Michael. Feel free to email Clint. I believe, though, there are sufficient answers to these questions. But what I really want to highlight this morning is that the psalmist is able to praise God even while they maintain that God is fully in control during his hardships and trials. I think many of us, we get stuck and we seem to think that if God is good And if something bad happens, then he must not be in control. Or that if God is in control and something bad happens, then he must not be good. But the psalmist doesn't seem to get stuck with either of these two conclusions. And here's my best guess why. I think the psalmist views his difficulties or views her difficulties as circumstances used by God for the psalmist's own benefit, for their refinement. I love how Augustine, the 4th century African scholar, he commented on this psalm. He says this, "You have not fired us like hay, but like silver. By applying to us fire, you have not turned us into ashes, but you have washed off our uncleanliness. You brought us into the net, not that we might be caught and die, but that we may be tried and delivered from it. You laid a crushing burden on our backs, for in our pride we had lifted ourselves up, but we were bowed down in order that being bowed down, we should be lifted up for good." I love that perspective, and yet I recognize how hard it is to maintain. Do you believe that God is powerful enough to use what you are going through to ultimately refine you and benefit you? How about God using this present trial for you, not just for you, but to benefit someone else? Is it possible that God is working in this difficulty for your good or for the greater good you can do for someone else? Psalm 66 teaches that we must believe that God can redeem or use any, and I really mean any, hardship for our good and for the good of others. Okay, the fourth thing Psalm 66 teaches when we face hardship is that we must obey. Obey. We see this in verses 13 through 15. When we face hardships and trials, we must obey. As Psalm 66 continues, the focus of the psalm, it continues to become more personal. Beginning in verse 13 through the end of the psalmist now uses personal pronouns. The text is now their own story. Let me read Psalm 66, verses 13 through 15. "I will come into your house with burnt offerings. I will perform my vows to you, that which my lips uttered, and my mouth promised when I was in trouble. I will offer to you burnt offerings of fattened animals, and with the smoke of the sacrifice of rams. I will make an offering of bulls and goats." The psalmist now reflects on their life after facing hardship and sort of commits to a life of sacrificial obedience. They'll follow through with the things that they vowed to do when they were in trouble. They will obey the statutes that God called the Israelites to do in the Old Testament. They will give back sacrificially to God because of what God has given and done for them. How easy is it, though, for us to stop obeying God when things are difficult? Right? When things are difficult, when we feel overwhelmed, we feel burdened. And so maybe we tell ourselves, right, like we're entitled to some kinds of disobedience. Often that looks like indulgence, like overdoing something that we know is wrong. Some of us are prone to sin like that in the midst of hardships. Some of us, though, are a little bit different. Others of us react the opposite way. We don't become indulgent, we become stingy. We tell ourselves, with everything that I'm going through or I've gone through, I don't have to do some things anymore. I don't have to be patient. I don't have to forgive. I don't have to serve. I don't have to be generous. But the psalmist describes obedience, not indulgence or stinginess. And one of the ways that we are called to endure in a trial and to thrive after a trial is by simple obedience. Doing what God calls us to do, living the life that Jesus modeled for us, rejecting the temptation to indulgence or stinginess. We stay obedient to his commands. We stay faithful to him. We keep being generous with our love towards others. Is there something that you're increasingly tempted to in seasons of difficulty? Like when you're stressed or you're going through things, are there things that you know, hey man, I'm tempted to indulge like this, or I'm tempted to be stingy like that? Maybe this week is a chance or on the drive home to have another conversation like that. To say to someone, hey, here's something that I'm tempted with when I'm in a season of suffering or difficulty. Can you pray for me? Can you check in with me about that? I'd love for us to be really practical with one another, and so we understand one another and say, hey, when I'm going through a hard time, this is what that sometimes looks for me. Will you help me? Okay, fifth, final thing that we see from Psalm 66 that teaches us how we might face hardship well is this. Tell someone. Tell someone. You see that in verse 16 through 19. The final call from verse 66 is that we are supposed to share our experience with others. Verse 16 through 19 says this, "Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell what he has done for my soul. I cried to him with my mouth, and the high praise was on my tongue. If I had cherished iniquity in my heart, the Lord would not have listened, but he truly God has listened. He has attended to the voice of my prayer." I believe this is true both during and after our trials. We need to share with others during our trials because we need people to be praying with us. We need people to hear our stories. We need to hear their stories. We need people to listen and to empathize with us. And we actually need people to hear and carry our stories. And we need to hear and carry the stories of others to remind ourselves that we are not the only ones facing trials. We're not the only people. None of us are meant to struggle in isolation. But I think that's what so many of us do. It's so many of us what we choose to do. Maybe it's pride, maybe it's fear, maybe it's a lack of vulnerability. But I want to be clear, I don't think anybody gets better in isolation. There's a dynamic I've noticed over the years as being a pastor, but also myself, that when people have a season or a hard time, they do, and I want to describe it to you. And it looks something like this. We start to feel overwhelmed, we start to feel stressed, we start to feel discouraged, maybe we're going through something hard, and so we have this feeling that we need to pull back from relationships to take care of ourselves. And that sounds really good on the surface, and so people, they give us distance. If we're involved at a church, we pull back, we might drop out of a small group or attend infrequently, we might stop serving, and we might stop attending church or attend infrequently, and usually we pull back from friends and relationships and we begin to self-isolate. And here's what I've noticed again and again, that when we do this, we don't get better. Usually we stagnate or we spiral. In isolation, our problems grow, and then we've cut ourselves off from the very mechanism, Christian community, that God has given us to help us through our trials. And it's not until we re-engage with others that we begin to experience breakthroughs. So I just want to encourage us to say, let's not pull back from one another. If you are in the middle of a trial or a hardship, let's press in towards relationships with other people. That is how we will get better, not alone, but together. Finally, last thing, we need to tell people not just during our trials, but after. That's part of what this psalm is, right? After they've endured a trial, they are sharing with us their experience, their victory. And we should want to share and testify how God brought us through our sufferings and our difficulties. That's why the psalmist writes this song. And this can happen inside or outside of the church. We can testify to encourage other believers. We can testify to people who don't yet believe so that they might be drawn to faith, so that they might have a place to go in their time of need. They might be helped by God in their times of difficulty. You may not have all the answers when you talk to someone about your faith, but each of us has a story and a testimony of God's enduring faithfulness in our lives. Tell somebody yours. For Christianity, the center of that story we tell people has to be and is inevitably Jesus Christ. That is why Christianity is called Christianity and not Christianism. It's following a person, not a set of philosophy or beliefs. And ultimately for the Christian, what this psalm should teach us is that Jesus is who we sing about. That's what we do in worship. Jesus is who we remember. That's what we do in communion. Jesus is who we believe in. That's what we declare in baptism. Jesus is who we obey. That's what we do when we serve and we have an offering. Jesus is who we tell people about. That is what we do when we preach and we share our faith. Jesus is the center of it all. And it's his death and it's his resurrection that ultimately make our hardships bearable. And I truly believe that there is no greater answer to whatever trial or difficulty you are facing than to coming into a real relationship with Jesus Christ. Augustine, he also said this, God had one son on earth without sin, but never one without suffering. Jesus understands. This is the hope of the gospel. Let's pray. God, you promise abundance and hope. And yet I know for many of us today, that's not what we feel or experience. So God, I pray that in this time of difficulty, that we would come to Jesus, that we would see him as someone who understands our difficulty, and yet rose again. Is the ultimate picture of hope, the ultimate picture of abundance. Let us come to him today. Amen. As we enter this time of reflection, I want us to just consider and think about Jesus again. That Jesus lived a life that we haven't and couldn't live, a life free from sin, and yet that he understands our sufferings because he lived a fully human life with all of its struggles, with all of its temptations, and yet he endured. If we look to him, we can also endure. Hebrews 10:14-16 says this, we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in our time of need. Today, each of us have the opportunity to cry out for mercy, no matter what we've done, to find grace in our time of need. Whether you're a follower of Jesus already or you want to cry out to him for the first time, I want to invite you to think about that, to do that today, because it is Jesus who allows us to join that final conclusion of this psalm. Blessed be God, because he has not rejected my prayer or removed his steadfast love from me. Let's take some time to reflect.
We hope you enjoyed today, and thanks again for taking the time just to tune in. If you have any questions about Eastown or what it means to put your trust and faith in Jesus, we have many resources available on our website. If you have more questions than what you can find on the website, simply email us at info@eastown.church, and we would love to connect with you. We believe the church should be making a positive difference in your life and in the community in which we exist. And we can only do that through people's generosity. If that is something you would like to do, simply visit eastown.church/give. And again, thanks again for joining us. Tune in next week. Or hey, better yet, visit us in person. Have a great day.